Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending where you are, of course, in the world.
Yes.
And today we're going to talk about how can art support you in being heard and, as a consequence, finding your voice.
Such a great topic.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I felt that too, and I suppose part of it is because I'm rebranding. And I think finding through writing my memoir and obviously journaling and in whatever way you do it, I came to the conclusion or the realization, I think a lot of us have this, so many of us have been hurt in life somehow or other, whether it be through childhood abuse or just something's happened or whatever it might be, and you don't feel heard. So basically, you don't feel heard. But then how do you find your voice to be heard? How do you do this? It's a lot to unpack. So what were your thoughts when we sort of looked at this topic and you adding wisely to find your voice?
I kind of immediately thought of, it's like the relationship that you then form with your, in my case, my canvas and my paints.
Yes.
So whatever medium you work with, whatever bit of creativity, whether it's cooking or baking or knitting or whatever, I just thought about how that creates that space for us to find our voice, right? To explore what we even want to say, like especially when there's a lot going on in our heads or in our emotions, and how working on art just gives us that beautiful, safe place to figure that out, right? To communicate with something that isn't going to judge us, isn't going to make us feel bad or shame or, shut us down.
Yes.
And so whatever resistance you hit when you're working with creativity is, that it's you, right? And it's okay for you to figure out how to deal with that. And you may not have an answer in that moment. Yes. So that was kind of what popped into my head.
And initially. I like that. And it's always interesting because we come from different ways of thinking with art, because you've been an artist for many, many years. Obviously, I'm just starting. See, for me, it'd be the other way around. Initially, I was so scared again because I had been hurt about my art and I hadn't felt heard or being seen. So for me, initially, it was the opposite. I found it quite hard to start the art because a lot of the old stuff came up about not being perfect, not getting it right, so that's hurt. So it's taken me a while to be able to use art in the way that you're talking about, is to how to express myself.
Okay.
So for me, it's the other way around. Whereas I've done it with journaling, whereas a lot of people, initially it was hard journaling too, because it's still finding the words and, so it's not always easy to start with necessarily.
No, that's very true. And it isn't, it isn't for me either, because art wasn't, when I started into art, it wasn't as a healing modality at all. It was just, what I was exploring and learning and doing.
Yes.
So, it's only been over the past few years where I have tapped into that aspect of art. So yeah, and when emotions are really high, like I've said before, then I struggle to come and sit with the canvas. So it has to be a very conscious thing for me too. So
yes, so it's really it is, isn't it? It is. And I found because someone felt when we called it hurt, not hurt, or how do we hear, that it was negative, but what it is also about is bringing to light, how do we feel we've not been heard? I know for me, through my childhood, I was shut down so often. But I developed an aggressive point of view, an aggressiveness, because that was one way I got heard.
Right.
You know, so being aggressive or standing up against my late father, at least he saw me. I felt visible. Now I'd run a mile, but that's not the point. You know, but that was one way of getting attention. And to also, for me, it was also when I created this persona of you can't hurt me when he was, I created that shield that he couldn't see, which I then took into life. I'm not going to show you that you hurt me.
Right.
You know, because in here I'm feeling really hurt, sad, vulnerable. So there was a form of protection. But then what I developed was an element which I, don't like admitting, but, an element of spiteful. I could be not spiteful, but I could be spiky. You have those, you react back as a form of attack.
Or a little like passive aggressive, those little passive aggressive zings.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Go. Yes. Because you'd hurt me. Rather than admit where it was appropriate that either I was hurt, or even admit it to myself. And I think that's the other thing I'm learning with this, is not only being heard by others, but it's hearing yourself. I think this is what you're saying with your art. So you want to go, does that resonate for you in your art?
I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I can always pick it up. Don't always about that. And it might be, what didn't you want to hear, my girl? No. I think something that I'm also learning is it's such a vast thing, this hurt, because we can also unwittingly, and this is something I needed to learn, was keep hurting yourself, because you're so used to being hurt. You keep hurting yourself because you don't know how to protect yourself, look after yourself, love yourself, honor who you are. Therefore, I wasn't also, you don't then hear yourself either, that you are hurting. You don't hear your body.
Well, and then we step into those the self-protective mechanisms that we've developed, right? As a way to not have to go there.
That's
so
exactly
whatever that is.
Yeah, that's right. And I look back now and I just think with my body, I just go, oh, wow. Because I ended up with a complete and utter nervous breakdown in my early 40s in hospital. And I was in there. I was only going to go in for the night. So this is how the denial was, so much so. I mean, I could hardly even get in there. And I can always remember looking back, I didn't even know how to read the form to fill in. I couldn't even put it together. I couldn't remember my name, nothing. But I was determined to come out again because I had no one to care for me. I had no one, I had my business massage practice then, no one around, family dynamics. So, of course, I pushed myself.
Right.
And I never really took the time off to hear. My body was telling me it was absolutely exhausted, done, dusted. It needed time. But I was scared. And I was scared of being vulnerable.
Wow. So how did you work through that one?
Well, to be honest with you, with a great bit of difficulty, because I ended up, and I laugh now, because instead of ending up in hospital, this was after then the car accident didn't help. I ended up in Bali instead of hospital. So and I took a month off, but again, still not enough. So I think what it was I just kept pushing myself. And also because through how I'd become as a child, I was parentified very young. And so I was always a strong, independent one. You have that big mask on. Well, of course, I felt really, what would people think? Particularly doing massage and Reiki and beautiful facials and things like that. And, telling everyone, now you make sure you look after yourself, and bang, there was me.
Not quite doing the same, right?
That's exactly right. And it was lovely because when I came back, and my clients were fantastic, but it was sort of like, no one judged me, but I judged myself. See, I was hurting myself.
Right.
Because I couldn't give myself grace.
That one's a hard one.
Yes. Yes. So where, you know, anyone who's watching here and on the replay on YouTube, where do you feel not heard? Now that takes courage. You might not want to write it out, but sometimes it's just sort of, and part of this is also storytelling, because this is what Rodine, you and I are doing, is storytelling, you know, is just having these conversations to help. Well, I love them because I always learn so much, and I'm just hoping others do too. So where do you feel you haven't heard yourself, Rodine?
Ooh. I think I have definitely not heard myself when it comes to boundaries.
Yeah.
Like trusting that instinct, because of course we usually learn to shut that down, right? In order to fit into wherever we need to fit into. And so we carry forward being the good girl, right? And so when I just totally kind of ignored setting boundaries when I wasn't feeling safe.
Yeah.
And right. And so then when you don't have a boundary, when you don't know how to set a boundary and you continue to move forward, then you have to engage in all kinds of survival mechanisms, right?
Yes.
And so, yes, like the passive aggression or beating yourself up, talking to yourself horribly, those kinds of things.
Yes.
So I definitely know that's one area where I have been very deaf and not heard. So yeah, it's been, and that and that came right out front and center for me this week, as I had to kind of deal with some situations that were not of my causing at all.
Yeah.
And where I was, you know, kind of a little bit attacked by someone who didn't approach me with curiosity or with understanding or asking questions, but a full-on, they assumed they knew something and went from there. And I had to thankfully I had the time to process it and to let it be uncomfortable and for me to get clear before I had to respond.
Yes.
But it was a very cool process because I responded incredibly well and spoke my truth. So speaking of, like, talking about finding your voice, I found my voice and I expressed myself honestly and, you know, with integrity and stuff. And of course, you know, the other person was massively thankful and impressed.
Yes.
So it was very interesting to go from kind of basically feeling attacked and then feeling like, oh my God, I must have done something wrong, which of course, absolutely not true, to working through that whole thing and then having to actually communicate it all, right? It was like huge for me. So.
And I hear it because huge for me too, and it still is, depending on the person, depending on the situation, you know, depending on why I felt the need not to speak up. You know, there's often, for me, there was a need behind that, fear of being abandoned, rejected, you know, on my own. So, and I love that word curiosity, because that is now, how can you stay with the discomfort with curiosity, without judgment? And like you said,
Yes.
and that's how I was so interested when I saw the therapist just end of last year, and she explained something about me, which was quite interesting, how when we get defensive, that is when we go on the attack.
Yes.
And when we do that, and it's immediate, and I was like, oh my God, you know, that's, and then you wonder why it escalates, and then the other person doesn't feel heard because you're not feeling heard and you are just reacting, and then it becomes this cycle. And sometimes it can go to the point where you can't rectify the relationship, friendship, whatever it might be. And particularly if one person isn't willing to, and it could be yourself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's that has become, because I've had a crazy week, and so that but there is something about the curiosity, and I can't remember where this phrase has come from, but first seek to understand. And I know it's used in educational psychology, but I can't remember where it first originated or who gets credit for that. But this week for me has been kind of a first seek to understand kind of week, like just situation after situation after situation. And interestingly, both ways, right? Like that event I just told you about, that was where someone else needed to exercise that, but then I had to for myself in return, right? And then there have been some other things, and it's like, oh, have to do some investigating, be curious about this, and focus on the best possible learning outcome, right? Like it's all about learning and growth. So yeah, it's been a wild, wild week.
And we'll imagine, because it is really, really looking at yourself as well, and
Yes.
that's what we're taught in counseling as well. But that's where I found journaling, whatever it might be, is self-reflection and therefore self-determination. What role am I playing in this? Because often we see ourselves also as the victim, and we sometimes have this righteousness of, and again, there's that yucky feeling about, well, I have the right to, or they hurt me, or rather than, like you said, how can you step back and understand? And I think it comes to a point within reason where they're coming from, but not to drop into the people pleasing or even the fawning and then losing yourself in it.
Yep.
And I think I'm also learning with the art is to be able to come down. Now, I can't always express my emotions to art, but I just come down. I use color. What colors do I need to use today? Or if I'm feeling a little bit not creative, I'm learning now a lot to do a lot more of just the doodling, and because my colors are going to be pink, this is what I do now, Rodine, just this practice. So that helps me just come into the moment, just helps me it's nothing big and thinking about. And, it's amazing then what you do create without realizing what you've created. You just doodle and then you go back. And when I show it to my partner, he goes, oh, wow, it's not until you actually step back, because all you're doing is just being in that moment and allowing. So I find it like it just goes, my body can just go. And then I can turn it around, perhaps to excitement and delight, to go, oh, what happened
Look at
there?
that. Yes. Create a bit of lightness and a bit of space, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And then by doing that, because I found for me, when I do that in whichever way, then I can start hearing myself, but also in my body. So I can just sit in and allow things to come in. Where have I felt hurt? Why do I feel hurt? And I'm also learning not to be so analytical all the time, because I need to always be analytical in that. This is different. This is just allowing it to arise rather than forcing it.
Right. Yeah. Let it bubble up and come out, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Yes. Yeah. And it can be surprising what does come out.
Yeah. Or what you work through.
That's right.
What comes out, what comes up, the solutions that come up. I like that too, right?
Yes.
And I'm trying to get better at that when I feel like I need the solution right now, I need the answer right now. It's like, no, if you have the luxury of time, leave it until tomorrow, right? Something will come up.
Yeah.
And of course, it usually does.
Yes, exactly right. And it does usually. And it is that's another thing about learning to hear. When you just say, take the time, take the space, step back, breathe.
Yeah.
And you know how they used to say, I still think, be responsive rather than reactive. Because often it's a knee jerk. You want to, and so many of us, I know for me, I don't like sitting in it. I want to get it sorted out right now. I want to know everything is okay. Rather than just going, no, it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. It has to get resolved now.
Exactly right.
Well,
that's it. Oh my God. And I think of how
doesn't.
many. Yeah. And I know for me in the past, all I did was make it worse in a way, or even worse for me, because I'd be doing platitudes and, you know, I'd be caving in, and then I'd realize I'd hurt myself again because I wasn't honoring me and my own pain because I hadn't found my voice. Finding my voice was too scary.
Well, you couldn't trust it, right?
That's exactly right.
That often hadn't worked well in the past. So
that's exactly right. That's it.
Oh no, I can't do that. Yeah.
Because if I do, this will happen. And look, depending on the person you're dealing with, it may happen. So we can't avoid that.
Yeah.
You know, because you can't be responsible. The Gestalt therapy training taught me this. You can't be responsible for what the other person is, how they're going to react or respond. But what you can be responsible for is how you say it in your tone of voice. And I like that because it's also you hearing yourself, honoring your tone of voice, and it's practice.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have your tone of voice. You are angry. It's okay to express your anger. But again, for me, it came from a place of whoop, you know, and I'd be like the attack rather than just saying, you know, I am angry. And it's okay, you know, because that's another reason why, you know, we're talking. Well, I wanted to talk about this as I'm rebranding is because we are not heard in those intense emotions. Oh, not allowed to be angry. You know?
Oh, because then you're just irrational, right?
That's right.
Well, yes, I might be, but let me work through it so I can get to a place where I can be rational, right?
Exactly right. And good girls don't get angry or jealous or negative. You just always plaster this beautiful smile on your face. And, you know, someone might have done something really painful. So again, what are you doing? You're not hearing yourself. As you said, you're not setting your boundaries and going, actually, no. You've just stepped all over me. But that does take courage to do. And I still can't always do it. And the other thing is, when, you know, doing this in my head, if I need to voice something about whatever it is with a person or a situation in my head, I have it down pat. Tone of voice is great, words are great, because the other person's not there. And then when I go to actually do it,
and then there's reality, and reality is
exactly
not
right.
Quite, not
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And again, we hear that, and it does take practice, one step at a time. But Jesus, you know, you really want to be able to do it immediately. Let me tell you. You know.
Yep.
So, but I'm finding it really interesting coming back like to the art. It's helping me to find my voice, a personality. How do I want to present my art? How do I want to therefore write? How do I want to, you know, do things, have fun, allowing myself to be self-taught with some online courses? I'm finding it interesting. So finally I'm hearing myself. Finally I'm hearing, you know.
Nice. That always feels good.
I have to say it does. It does feel good. And then comes that freedom. So I think what you said earlier, again, I'm going to bring it up, curiosity. Once we can get to this stage in our lives, it's like, why do I keep allowing myself? Because basically, and I used to never like this, allow myself to be hurt. I used to think, you know, but it's like, why do I allow this to keep happening? Why am I constantly feeling like this? Well, because then it comes back to be curious. use your art, journaling, dance, whatever, to go, well, what is it still about me that hasn't quite got there yet? And see it as a learning rather than as a failure.
Mm-hmm. And celebrate it.
Exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And we all have the most beautiful voices. We've just not been taught how, or it was squashed somewhere in, you know, in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Finding your voice.
It is exactly right. And I think it comes back to also learning how to love yourself, protect yourself, feel safe, and not feel, because, you know, I know I was taught it's selfish, you're self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
That's another big one to overcome.
Yep. Or that you're a fraud in there anyway, right? That
Yeah,
you're off track somehow.
that's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. And also, this is going a little bit off track, but it's also how people can manipulate each other, you know, to get what you want, to get these things. And I look back, I never thought I was a manipulator, of course not, you know, but when I look back and into it, I manipulated at times too, again, you know, and I think that was partly to get back, you know, to feel that I had power. And it's such false power. And again, don't like admitting it, but when I look back, you know, these are the things I had to hear myself sometimes and go, oh, what was I doing?
Yeah.
What was I
That's all a
doing?
part of it too, isn't it? Because we're not perfect. Who the heck is perfect?
That's right.
And if we're all here to grow and learn, then, that's a part of it.
Yeah. It is. And that for me took a long time to own and acknowledge. And because for me, being perfect meant I didn't get hurt, well, supposedly.
Right.
That was the thinking behind that. So, of course, if I was perfect and did well, I was more likely to get praise.
Right.
So I thought. So, you know, you take that. So, yeah, it's a very powerful, it's a big topic. And I think it's also, for me, the first step is owning, when I was looking back, and I'm still, how I felt hurt. Why did I feel hurt? How do I go on from here? You know, and then make a decision how I then behave, how I respond, how I go back. And sometimes I've learned as well, sometimes it's not worth responding as long as you're aware of, sometimes it's just not worth it.
No.
So
no. It's always worth the journey of the self-discovery for yourself.
yes,
But that doesn't necessarily mean that has to involve anybody else.
that's exactly right.
That's
That's
ours.
exactly right. That's right.
Ours.
Yep. That's right. And that's that self-expression. That's that being able to go, right, I'm hearing myself. This is how I'm expressing it. And I think another thing I'm learning too is I actually don't need to know why I'm creating this. That's been a big learning for me too. I don't need to know why I'm creating this. It's just I'm coming down, I'm putting something on paper, or I'm just going to write whatever without the need to know, without the need for an outcome.
Well, there doesn't always need to be an outcome, right?
Right.
When we go for a walk, there doesn't necessarily need to be an outcome every time we go for a walk. Maybe, it's just to be out in nature and get some fresh air and just enjoy that. There doesn't necessarily have to be a specific outcome to it. And there's a lot of freedom in that too.
Yep. That's exactly right. And also, to sort of come to, it's also the more you can acknowledge that and clear that, the more you're going to hear and listen to your voice, your intuition, your inner knowing. Because it's there. It is there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's about hearing yourself. Then you can do something different. And that strengthens, like you were saying earlier, your boundaries. That strengthens your voice.
Yeah.
So it's very powerful.
Growth. Oh, growth.
Yes, I know. Sometimes it's like, really? More? No more? No more?
I know, right? I know. At least I felt this week I was moving into the practical stuff, right?
Yes, yes.
The higher level practical exams versus just another test.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And I think it is, how can we also change that around? Not, oh God, here it goes again. It's like, okay, you know, in a way, it's like, and I don't want to sound sort of like that positivity or it's like now, it's like, okay, here I am again. Yes, I bashed myself a bit, like that shame I just had, you know, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, where did this go? So again, I was able to turn it around once I had once I really experienced it. I mean, of course I resisted it at first. So it's a process. Yeah. It's a process. And finally could go, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Okay, don't like it. And then I just walked through it, you know, and gave myself some grace.
Grace is a nice thing to be able to give yourself.
It is, isn't it?
So important.
Yes, that's exactly right. So, do you have anything else you'd like to share, Rodine? Anyone else before we go?
No, I think I'm good.
I think so. And I'd like to end, and I really like this because I wrote it down. First, seek to understand. And it's not only yourself, it's the other person, but also yourself.
Yeah.
I think that is fantastic. Because it is about understanding, because then you can do something different. Because as they say, if you keep doing the same thing, what is it? If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same result. Yeah. But if you don't step back and look at it. So. So I like that. First, seek to understand.
And be curious.
And be curious. And I think that's the other thing. And be curious when you, So I don't know which chicken and the egg. First seek to understand, or first be curious to seek to understand. I mean, who knows? That doesn't really matter. I'm just being, but I like that. Yeah, they don't even need to go together. They can just be separate too, right? Just be curious. That's exactly right. They don't need to. That's right. Yeah. Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Yes. And thank you as always. Thank you. And we'll see you and everyone next week. Yes. Have a wonderful week, everyone. And if you think of anything, do add to this, to the comments, because it's I enjoy hearing other people's opinions and thoughts and what they got from this. Yes, so, I do too. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye.